What's up, guys? Today we're talking to the Chief Revenue Officer over at Aggregate Sports, and we're talking sponsorships, specifically Olympic sponsorships, and how Aggregate Sports and the team over there connect the brand with the athlete. And one of the things I truly, really appreciate, I should say, is the fact that they connect the stories of the athlete with the brand. So it's not just, brands handing over checks to support athletes in these sports in the Olympics. No, they're connecting them so there's a win-win. There's a win on both sides. There's an ROI positive for both parties. So our team over at Aggregate Sports is doing a great job with this. I hope you guys really enjoy this interview. It's very insightful. There's some insights here that I didn't know, and I'm sure there's plenty out there that don't know this before you listen. So make sure to tap into this one because this is the Gametime Guru. So,
what time is it? Game time!
This is the Gametime Guru podcast, where I interview sports figures from all over the world to help deliver a panoramic view on sports. So whether you're a former athlete, one of the crazies, or simply a casual sports fan, this is the perfect show for you as we peel back the curtains and learn from our guests every single week. I'm your host, Shane Larson, and I'm helping you see sports through a different lens. What's up, everybody? Welcome out to another episode of the Gametime Guru podcast. Shane Larson here, host of the show, 8.5 years running of the podcast. So whenever you tune into this, just know that at the time of this recording, we've gone over 8.5 years of recording this podcast. Okay. And in those 8.5 years, the show has been downloaded on the audio side in 183 countries. So pretty much all worldwide, all 50 states. Thanks in large part to all of you. Now, I am still, at the time of this recording, still trying to build out my YouTube following. Never really focused on YouTube, but grateful for all the people who have actually followed me over there on that side of things. That is by far my smallest platform, but I would love to grow it organically and not put any money behind it because that's how I do things. So do your thing, guys. Any of the listeners on there, if this is your first time tuning in, welcome aboard. Do your thing and hit me with a follow over there. And maybe share it with a friend or a family member that might be interested in this as well. It would really help me out. We're just trying to build the following over there. So thanks to everybody there. And I also want to shout out Timberline Digital Marketing for being today's sponsor of the podcast. If you guys need any marketing needs, digital marketing, regardless of where you are at in the country, you guys got to hit up Timberline Digital Marketing. I got timberlinedigitalmarketing.com here in the description. They'll help you out with your Google ads. They'll help you out with your Facebook ads. They're going to help you out with your social media content. They're going to get everything taken care of on your website, making sure your SEO, your AEO, and all the zero-click marketing is optimized. So make sure to check them out at timberlinedigitalmarketing.com. All right, guys. So now we're done with all the fluff. Let's get into the good context here of the interview. As you guys heard in the introduction, we are bringing on the business side of this. He is the Chief Revenue Officer over at Aggregate Sports. His name is Rem de Rohan, and we're excited to chat with him. Rem, thanks for joining the show, man.
Thank you.
Heck yeah. So I kind of want to give a quick overview of Aggregate Sports and what your role is as a Chief Revenue Officer, just to kind of, set the framework here for us. So Rem, can you, just go over what Aggregate Sports is all about and what your role is and what you do as a Chief Revenue Officer?
Sure. So, we're a mid-sized sports marketing sponsorship sales organization. Really, we primarily, while we have multiple business lines, we do primarily focus on being experts in property representation. So, representing a handful of best-in-class organizations, teams, leagues, national governing bodies who, have wonderful assets to sell. They just don't really have the infrastructure internally to bring them to market. So, we really specialize in our name, right? Aggregate Sports, bringing together assets to create a larger whole. And so we've done a great job of bringing together a handful of Olympic national governing bodies and other properties that are similar in scale and scope. Some of them have similar audiences, but all of them need help to sell. So we're really a central point as an agency to bring to market a lot of really great assets across multiple levels of business.
Sweet deal. So one of the questions I had for you, for those who might not be familiar with it, Rem, what exactly is a national governing body and how does it differ from, I guess, just other sports organizations or anything of that nature? Can you kind of give us a little rundown for that, for those who might not fully understand that?
Yeah, sure. It's funny. I live this every day, so I'll try to find the exact definition. But there's many national governing bodies out there. I think we specialize in the Olympic national governing body. So these are the organizations that really control a certain sport in the United States, and foster, the development of that sport from, for example, for U.S. figure skating, from little kids who are 2 and 3 years old learning how to skate to the first time, all the way up to some of the regionals and sectional events that happen all the time every year, and then really ultimately to get our athletes on the podium at the U.S. championships, the world championships, and the Olympics. So it's, U.S. figure skating is the national governing body for the sport of figure skating. USA Cycling is the national governing body for cycling. So it's really these are not-for-profit organizations who help develop the sport in the country, and ultimately put Olympians on the podium, and compete against the best of the world.
So to that point, then I guess so with the Olympic national governing bodies, is that what makes them unique compared to, like, I guess, other pro sports leagues or whatever, in regards to like their nonprofit organizations? I guess what would make them unique compared to working with a typical pro sports league?
Yeah, so Chan, I noticed on some of your socials, like, how much you're a proud American, and love to support USA. So I think that's a really big differentiator in between an NGB and maybe a professional team. And we all love the NBA and NFL and MLB, and they do wonderful business. But supporting an Olympic national governing body, there's a bit of a American pride to it. There's a bit of a national interest, and that it is a not-for-profit organization, and truly. I think an interesting fact here is, America is one of the very few countries that our Olympic movement receives zero funding directly from the government. And in comparison, a country like Japan receives 40% of their funding from, directly from the government. So for us to be competitive on the international stage, we need corporate sponsors. Our athletes rely on the money that comes in, to their pockets. So, and I think on a kind of another layer of that, only about 20% of the operating budget for the national governing bodies comes from the Team USA, the Olympic governing body. So, again, wonderful that to have their support, but these teams really do, in order to put the best of the best to compete with the best in the world, they need our support. So I think there's a bit of an altruism to it, and a bit of a national pride versus necessarily going to the bottom line of a billionaire owner, or the Disney company, just who are wonderful people, but still at the same time, have different interests, I guess.
For sure. No, I like that. That's awesome. It's good to hear that too. It makes a lot more sense, because as I was framing some questions for the framework of the interview, I was trying to think, what would I want to know as a consumer? And that was one of those things, like, what makes the difference there, right? Like, and I'm around the sports world my whole life, like been around it in the weeds, so to speak. I still didn't understand that differentiator right there. So I guess what I want to ask here, now I want to dive a little bit deeper into it from your perspective. You guys are going, you mentioned sharing their stories, trying to get this out there for the corporate sponsorships. How do you guys, in your role with Aggregate Sports, how do you go about sharing their stories? Like, how do you find this to share the story so the story sells for the corporate sponsorships to come in for them to show more support? Like, what do you guys do from a marketing perspective to help get that out, so that maybe I can share this with somebody who's listening and be like, okay, we want to work with Aggregate Sports to do this. How do you guys get the stories out?
Yeah, good question. So, you know, everything we're selling, every organization, national governing body, or even some of our independent properties, has a very targeted audience to them, and a following, whether it's through TV viewership, or on site at events, or just general fans that we're reaching through social media and membership and all that. So we work very hard to uh, get down to the basics of the third party kind of research of where do these sports excel, right? Or where do these fan bases excel? Are they heavy? Obviously, are they heavier female focused? Are they into some of these products, right? We kind of dig down to their consumer behavior. So um, we very much approach brands based on a strong third party kind of accepted look into exactly who the folks are that are consuming these sports through multiple channels, and that helps open the door. But I think from your perspective, like, more and more these days, brands push us um, to, like, how do we really create the hook, right? How do we really create that unique um, nexus between what the brand's trying to accomplish and what the sport is offering, so that we tell mutual stories, right? We tell, the triumph from, a little girl learning how to skate again, and when they were 3 years old, competing. Maybe they qualify for the national championships, and then ultimately, potentially make the Olympic team. Attach that story with, a brand that's really trying to get talk about their grit and determination that embodies the brand. So we've done a really good job, I think, of being creative. Again, we work very closely with our teams, with the marketing folks at these teams to collaborate and really think about, once we kind of know what a brand is trying to achieve, how do we tell that story together? So we've got really wonderful support, from our friends at these organizations. But I'd say we custom content and create, the rise of social media, and people really consuming media in a lot of different areas. NBC and TV is very traditionally, heavy, and there's a lot of eyeballs on that. But brands more and more want to have these kind of stories, right? And like, how do they really integrate with the sport? And so we've really built up our capabilities, and our teams have, on the storytelling, of really making those connections. And I guess I'm really proud of that, or at least how that's grown. Um, but hopefully that answers I know that answers a couple questions, but that's, I think, super important to the success of these organizations, and the growth of them, is to really connect and tell the athlete stories, tell the team stories. What really sets them apart.
No, I really like that, because here's the thing. I even running my own media business, right? I run into like sponsorship opportunities all the time. And I try my best to show people, I talk to businesses, some of them, like some businesses literally will just do it for a tax write-off. I'll sponsor this person. I'll do that, whatever. It's a tax write-off. But there are a lot that want to see the ROI. Like, how does it connect with them? And so I've noticed that even myself on a much smaller scale, just trying to work with businesses, and they're wanting to see, like, okay, you got a sports podcast? How does that help my, restoration company? Like, how do we
Hmm.
even connect the dots there? But trying to find the stories that sell. I used to work for a guy named Russell Brunson, worked for him for 6.5 years. He's a marketing guru. Love the guy. And I remember him just talking about hook, story, offer. You're trying to find the hook, you're trying to find the story, you're trying to find the offer. How does this all connect? And I think that's cool that you guys are doing that work for people, so that the companies realize it's not just a tax write-off. It's not just a nice donation. That is cool. That's a nice part of it, probably, but you're doing it for a bigger cause, and it is having some sort of a connection back to what the company is trying to accomplish, which is good, because not everybody's doing that. I have a
Yeah.
question from the business side for you, Rem. Is like, have you run into any, I guess, issues, like a mistake that maybe you see people make when they're trying to sell sponsorships? Is it just the simple lack of connecting, like you're saying right there with the company, or are there any other mistakes you've seen or have experienced yourself in this process when trying to sell a sponsorship?
I love this question, because, and I tell, I've got a sales team, and I'm also very, involved in selling myself. I think, people, there's a lot of keys to sales, right? It's something that you learn over time. But I'd like to think that, the most important thing in sales is creating value for people. People like to do business with people they like. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. But they're not just going to do business with you because they like you. It's all about creating value. So from the first outreach, everything we sell really is outbound effort, which I like. I really like being able to get out there and tell the story, instead of just kind of sitting. Not that anybody's really sitting back, but fielding calls. We're out there every day, so it's a very Darwinistic. It's a very survival of the fittest. Of it all comes down to, what value can I provide for you, so you can go sell your product or service, and do it at an efficient rate, creatively, and just really jump off the page, and compete. So I try to stress that in our team all the time, that I think, a lot of people think, hey, I just have this thing to sell. I'm gonna How do I sell it? I have to go sell it. And sales is very much a two-way street. I mean, I believe that wholeheartedly, where you have to really listen to people, and that's not always easy, because you really want to sell this thing you
Yeah.
have. But it only happens if you're listening, and you're consulting, and you're finding meeting the need that they have, because you're their partner. Like, salespeople are just partners with buyers or marketers, to they need us as much as we need them, because they're really putting their reputation, their value on the line. Like, at the end of the day, they're investing their hard-earned money or and their company's hard-earned money with you as a person, to help them succeed. And whether that's personally, get promoted and look good, but ultimately it's like, how are we selling more products? So how are we making the commerce go around? And so, again, I think what I've really enjoyed about what we sell is that they're wonderful properties, they're wonderful assets, they deliver for people, but they're seldom are things that people wake up and say, "Oh, how do I get that?" Or I need this. How did I didn't know that I could get this from you. So we have to go make the case, and more often than not, we're successful in doing that because we're thoughtful and we listen and we just try to create a partnership. I know that sounds a little cheesy, but I do think I think the word sales sometimes is kind of gets a bad connotation because people they're just barking, they're kind of getting in a conversation. "Oh, I got to throw up, throw up what I have to say." It's more just, try to have a conversation, and try to come out with an outcome that's actually going to help this person do their job. So, anyway, I find that I try to tell that to our sales guys all the time. I do find that that's been a pillar of my success, building relationships based on, sure, they like a person, they know, but they trust me, they know I can deliver. And I do think some people look at sales as sort of like maybe a short term, more transactional thing, like, "Oh, I just got to get this, I'm going to get them, I'm going to make this sale." It's not just making this sale, it's making a lifetime of sales because you see the same people again and you get a reputation and ultimately you have to deliver. And I guess the last thing I would say on that is it really takes a team. I could be the mouthpiece for our organization for sure, but if we didn't have a strong, if we didn't work with really strong organizations in the teams that, that we represent, and also have a really good delivery team here internally, like Aggregate Sports reputation is much more than just me, as a salesperson or my partner. It's a whole group. So, I guess I'll leave you with on this. I think what people make mistakes on or what people really need to embody is that sales is a partnership, but the sales is after the sale. A lot of people will give you a chance. A lot of people will give you a chance in life. They crack the door open. You got to walk through it, and you got to stay in the room. And I really think about that all the time because you can't. That is the most important thing because time goes by real quick, and you have to build. And it's really musical chairs at the end of the day. You want to be the one sitting in the chair, and that's because you're a genuine person who believes and is an advocate for the brand that you're dealing with. So
No, I like your style, man. I love it. Just coming from a world like that myself. I mean, you're learning that the customer journey doesn't end at the sale point. That's just like that's the beginning of it. Truly, if you nurture that, then those customers become repeat customers, and it's just something that's genuine and authentic moving forward. So there's a lot of companies that preach that, right? But if you do it right, and you can tell a difference when someone's actually genuine and authentic in the way in which they're communicating with someone.
yeah, I think checking it not to interrupt, but I think checking in with people. I think it's interesting because a lot of my clients over the time, and whether that's at a team or the brand side, have become really friends of mine. And it's not because I'm trying to be there for of course I like to know their interests and everything,
Sure.
but it's just happened naturally when I think you trust people and you check in with them. And I think it's super important in sales to not everything has to be sales. Everything is building a relationship, but when you genuinely care about someone, and even if they don't have the same interests as you, and nobody's the same, right? But I think when you genuinely care about someone and their success, and then get to know their families and everything, it's a journey. But I think it's super important just because, and you're not doing it just for yourself. You're doing it because you really care about them and you like them. You want them to succeed. I think the world is big enough for everyone to succeed in some way, right? It doesn't have to be zero sum thing. So yeah, we do try to keep little check-ins here and there, or there's just not everything has to be, "Hey, I have this proposal. Hey, can you sign this?" It needs to be you're talking to them as people. It's a people business, and you're dealing with people. And I think everybody talks about AI and digital this, and that's all important, and those are helpful tools. But at least, hopefully, for my career, as long as I'm concerned, that decisions really will come from human beings, and human beings, like care about or should care about each other and their success. And again, I just think that's super important in any business, but in relationships.
I absolutely love what you just said right there. That's probably going to be going on LinkedIn as a reminder. So
All
appreciate
right,
that one.
good.
um, Rem, I'm trying to think of from an outsider's perspective, right? You mentioned the reason for sponsorships, but I think people are probably, because you hear about this all the time. So Olympic sports, we hear that, hey, if they get gold, they win X amount of dollars. They get silver, they win X amount of dollars. They get bronze, they win X amount of dollars. So they actually have like some sort of cash prize. I think there are a lot of people who don't still, after listening to this for 20 minutes, may not fully understand why do they need sponsorships, and like why would somebody need a sponsorship for a sport or whatever they're getting in. Like they assume that it's all expenses paid. They have an opportunity to represent the country, and then they have an opportunity to win something if they medal and get on the podium. I guess if you could just share with them what is the like why do they need a sponsorship, like from a financial perspective, something like how much does it cost, why is this helpful, etc.
Sure. So every team is different. We're talking about the Olympics here, so only the nonprofit organizations, but there's a lot of different scale, right? There's groups on the lower end that have a few thousand social media followers, and then there's groups that have 3 or 4 million on the higher end. So I think scale is super important to that. So what I what I love about sponsor, or why sponsor, obviously the Olympic movement, is these sports are fun. These sports are interesting. Like I think variety in life is great. I love that fencing, is an Olympic sport, and curling and wrestling, and it's not all just NBA and NFL. Basketball and football and baseball. So we got to keep these sports alive. And I think most importantly to all this, like it's about fostering the next generation of athletes, and an American pride, right? It's like, hey, we want to have the best luge team and the best speed skaters and the best skiers and snowboarders in the world, and have that pride and passion. And so it's all about the pipeline. It's all about creating the programs for little kids, and fostering really the development of the sport around obviously in the country, so that every 2 years and 4 years we can put the best of the best on there. So from an athlete perspective, you know I've chosen to do what I do, and I think I'm pretty good at it, and it has been lucrative for me. Um, Everybody has a passion, and these athletes don't, though, again, depending on the scale, but not everybody is Shaun White. For every Shaun White, there's 10,000, 50,000 other athletes that really do it for the love of the sport and the love of the competition, and they happen to be pretty good. Maybe they're really good at squash, and they're gearing up for the LA 28 Olympics. Like, so by and large, these athletes don't make a lot of money. It costs a lot to train. It costs a lot for coaches, for ice time, for their equipment, and they spend so much time training that they can't all be heads of marketing at companies and lawyers and doctors and everything. They really have to put in order for the US to be the best. These people have to commit and sacrifice a lot for of their lives to be the best. And at the end of the day, 50, and I don't know exactly the numbers here, but $50,000 for a gold medal, or even if it's $100,000, that's not life-changing money. That's not an NBA, super max contract. These people are still, they're putting just as many hours, if not more, and they're putting their health and lives on the line in some ways, to compete and be the best. And it's pretty meager. They're doing it for the glory. They're doing it for the glory of the United States, and obviously, for personal glory. But anyway, it really does matter that between sponsorship and membership and event revenues and foundations, to keep these sports alive and going and keep people competing in them, you need to support them. And I think ultimately, really, with all this is, brands that work with us, they're not doing it. There is an altruistic aspect to this, of course, and they do care about us competing in the Olympics, but they're not, they're still businesses, right? They're not doing this just as a charity. So it's because we connect with interesting audiences, and our fans are very passionate, and they care a lot about, they support the brands that support the organizations that they love. So if you're an athlete or an organization or anything in the Olympic movement, the like these brands really do see the passion that these fans bring, and those fans end up buying the products. So I think there's a multi-layer kind of answer to that, but you should absolutely support the Olympic movement, and then you should do it because it actually works for your business. I think that's really the key.
Dude, I love that. I love it. And someone like myself, Rem, I was a former boxer, and I grew up fighting for Golden Gloves and the USA Boxing Organization. And I used to watch the fighters in our region that we were prepping for like these types of events. I've seen how and even like, I mean, there's not what you were saying there, and this might not pertain to specifically to what you guys cover. I don't know if you guys cover boxing, but it's a similar concept. Is like these these fighters are putting a lot of time in the gym, and their coaches above all are not getting paid hardly anything. Like the boxing coaches out there for USA Boxing, they get paid hardly nothing. Like it's nothing. They're in there to dedicate their time. They love the sport. They love that they're trying to prep these fighters for going to the Olympics and doing their things and doing all the national and world tournaments. They don't make a lot. And that's a lot of sports are like that. Like you were just mentioned, there's a lot of sports where they're dedicating a lot of time with not much coming back in regards to that. So the need for help is huge there. I saw that all the time. They're fighting in rinky-dink gyms. They're training in those gyms because it's old school, doing the best they possibly can. But I mean, everyone's taking a pretty much a sacrifice for it. So I think that's super cool. Two questions left for you. You've mentioned a couple times here, LA's coming, just a couple years away from LA. We got Salt Lake in a little bit more
Oh
time,
yeah,
about 9 years or so. What is that? 11? What is that?
9 years
9 years?
away. Yeah.
Yeah, 9
Who's
years away.
counting? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But I'm sure, brands, especially LA, but brands are probably getting ready to go with sponsorships right now. So like, I'm curious, like what are brands like trying to do right now? How far in advance do you need to lock these contracts in? And what are you guys doing at Aggregate Sports right now, Rem, to try to get prep for LA, which is coming up in just a few short years?
Yeah, so good question. So I think I'll answer this a little broadly, but I've been in the Olympic movement and the NGB space for 14 years now. So I've seen a few cycles. I've seen some ups and downs. You know, for the first again, for the first probably 10 years of this, we had some pretty good support from what I call Team USA, USOPP level sponsors. So they would see. They would look at NGBs and see them as a value add, kind of a way to string together. There's 2 weeks every 2 years that the Olympics run, and hopefully everybody in the country tunes in and they have American pride. But what happens in those other 50 weeks, or I guess 100 weeks between? And that's where the NGBs come in. So we had some decent support from some of the big companies. And again, I'm speaking very broadly here, but with our kind of our core organizations over the past kind of, let's call it 3 years, the last cycle, a lot of that support has dried up or had dried up, because for various reasons, right? There's a lot of reasons. There's a lot of cycles and shifts in the movement, but I'd like to think that the needle kind of moved away from the teams, and they're spending a lot of money on big Olympic rights, and maybe they didn't see so much that we need the teams, we need the everyday passion of the fans, and honestly growing. If you want to see every 2 weeks, 2 weeks every 2 years, see some gold medals, you got to put the groundwork in. And that's what the NGBs do. So what I will say is I've been very heartened over the last couple of months as we head into, from Paris into Milan. So, this is a heavy cycle for us as we're gearing up for the winter for, sales cycle. We have, I don't say finally, but it's been a breath of fresh air to hear from some of these bigger Olympic brands to support, and the teams that need, certainly need their support, but also can provide a lot of value to them in the days around the Olympics. So we've there's nothing official yet, but we've had, the conversations have definitely picked up from a time over the last 4 or 5 years where the phones, the answers weren't coming, for various reasons. So I think that's super important for brands to finally recognize that. I think LA definitely helps. Having a domestic games, we haven't had one since 1996, so it'll be over 30 years. And so I think brands are waking up to that. I think it's tough because there's also the World Cup coming up next year. The Olympics are in 28. We'll be in France in 30. And then, in Salt Lake or Australia and then Salt Lake. So there's definitely a lot of competition. But I do think, and I don't know the numbers on the international side, but I think Olympics, kind of coming out of the COVID era, coming out of maybe the more Asia swing, Olympics in the U.S. and Olympics in Europe are back, and a lot of the brands are really seeing that, and we're excited about that. So I guess what are a lot of brands are doing to prepare. It's a lot of like there's a lot of layers to this, right? There's the big Olympic commitment, right? That they have to activate. I think a lot of brands find that they don't necessarily that again, all due respect to Team USA, and their rising tide raises their ships, and I wish their success is our success in a lot of ways. But brands spend a lot of money on Team USA rights, and there's outside of 2 weeks every 2 years, there's not a ton of ways to activate. So for brands to finally kind of pick up, because we operate while we are one group, from a sales perspective, from a revenue perspective, we are pretty separate, to be honest, or we have different interests. So it is really refreshing to kind of hear brands think about NGBs as a way to activate, fill the gaps, and really just at the end of the day, tap into the passionate fans that really care about these sports. Aren't just necessarily the casual, broad base. These are really targeted, passionate people. So anyway, we are working very hard to gear up for the next 7 months. I think again, I speak for U.S. figure skating as an example. We control our Olympic qualifying event. There isn't an Olympic trials. So that happens every 4 years. And the brands that are our sponsors, in January, I think 6th through 11th, they're going to be seen on the big stage in primetime on NBC. And a lot of fans are going to equate them with the Olympic movement because they're in this Olympic qualifying event. This, the thing that everybody waits for 4 years. So anyway, we're doing a lot of planning across multiple channels with a lot of brands, and we're seeing a nice uptick. I'm honestly very heartened for the movement to see some money, at least interest flow into the teams, and hopefully that continues through LA and then into Salt Lake. We'd love to see it. We think it really is going to be helpful for, at the end of the day, just U.S. competition, right? We want to be the best in the world. A lot of people in the United States think, we're the best country in the world. People can debate that, but I think athletics and being able to prove that on the world stage in a face to face is so cool and so important. And it's really, we need the brands. And so it's nice to see them kind of understand a little bit more where that comes from.
Heck yeah, man. Well, Rem, the last question I got for you, brother, is you mentioned earlier in the podcast, like it's not often that people are like, they're not like searching for this a ton. They're not coming out some of them don't even know it exists, like, to reach out to you guys. But in the event that someone might hear this interview and be interested in this, how does one get a hold of you or someone at Aggregate Sports to, explore their options of a sponsorship?
First of all, we'll find a way to give you a little commission on that, but you can reach out, email me, call me. We'll make sure my info is on the on the post. But we've got a great team at Aggregate Sports. There's 10 of us. There's a lot of people that can field the calls and come up, again, as I kind of said earlier, a very consultative approach to what you're trying to achieve. What we can offer to hit those boxes. And hey, we'd love it. And at the end of the day, it is helpful for the American sports prowess, and hopefully helpful for your bottom line as a business. So please reach out to me anytime, and I'll make sure that you get in touch with the right people.
Heck yeah. For you guys listening, make sure to check the description. If you guys have any questions as well, you can hit me up and I'll get you in contact with Rem as well. We'll have his contact information here, but if there's any questions, we can always get you in contact. So there's no excuses is basically what I'm trying to say. If you guys are interested, we've got a way. Rem, I just want to say thank you, man. Thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy. You got work, you got family, you're doing your thing, but I appreciate you taking the time to join me and share your insights and wisdom with us on the podcast.
Thanks, Shane. It was really a pleasure, and I wish you the best of luck, and hopefully maybe we can do one of these leading into the LA games. That'd be a lot of fun.
Heck yeah, man. Hit me up and let me know. And for all those who are listening, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this interview. Let me know what you thought, and we'll be coming to you guys next week with another interview. Take care. Guys, thanks so much for listening to another episode of my show. Now, if you could go and do me a favor, head over to iTunes, give me 5 stars, and leave me a review, it would be greatly appreciated. Thanks, guys. Appreciate your support.